what is the role of the agency today as even the agencies are using AI tools? How are you utilizing these tools? How do you navigate a customer's strategy that they've developed with the tool and guide them along the way towards your agency's perspective?
Every day as a marketing agency where our clients are running their businesses to make a profit, to do whatever they need to do to make their business grow, right? Or whatever their why is. So yes, AI is helping with content.
But I think also on top of that, there's also that human element that AI cannot put on top of it as well. I think when you're definitely writing, and just going back to the writing as well, if someone hasn't already written about it, how is AI going to talk about it?
AI is amazing for democratizing production, but it doesn't democratize strategy. If a business just uses AI to churn out content, they're just adding to the noise that drowns out their actual authority.
All right. Welcome to another episode of SEO On Air. I'm your host, Koa Kauwe. This is brought to you by Stan Ventures. Today, we have 3 agency guests on with us. I'm going to give you each a chance to introduce yourselves, tell us a little bit about your background, and just a small intro to your agency. And then we'll move on to a discussion that I hope is a little bit of fun as we move into the role of agencies today in the shifting AI world. So starting with Igor, please tell us a little bit about your history and your agency.
Yeah, thank you. Good to be here with everybody. My name is Igor Yadgarov, and I own an agency called Core Media. I've been doing digital marketing for 16 years. My core competencies are actually in search engine optimization. That was my first exposure to the marketing world. And, we have a lean and mean team. We also do focus on other services as well, paid advertising. We do a lot of web design. And quickly how I got into this business, actually I kind of fell into it. I was looking for a way to work from home prior to this business. Believe it or not, I spent a decade in the optics industry. I sold luxury eyewear for a celebrity eyewear designer in Manhattan called Robert Mark, and was a licensed optician, went to school for it. Then after that, I was an eye surgery consultant for a couple of years, consulting on like LASIK surgery and other surgeries. And when we weren't doing surgery, I was actually scribing and passing the instruments to the surgeon in the operating room. And the funny part about that is, fast forwarding to now, about a year and a half ago, my ex-boss, the surgeon, became my digital marketing client.
I think that's probably the most abnormal path to digital marketing that I've seen on the podcast for a while. Your experience is not the standard of worked at an agency and learned from there. We'll be excited. I'm excited to dive a little deeper into that to understand, how that first client launched, and maybe we'll pick that up later in the podcast. So Igor, I'm excited to have you as a guest. Thank you for joining us. Marilyn, please share with us your history. Tell me about your agency.
Absolutely. My company is Law Marketing Zone and MJ Media Group. I've been in digital marketing since the mid-90s. We currently service law firms in the U.S., full service digital marketing from SEO to paid ads, streaming TV, as well as a client intake service. So we help based on the number of cases you need and the type of service you need. And we do everything from a CRM to help nurture the leads for you and just to increase your level of success whenever you're working with us.
Well, we're excited to dive into that as well. We see the need for agencies to take on even more of a role beyond just the SEO, PPC stuff. That seems to be a trend or a pattern we see in the industry today. So I'll be excited to get your insights. Thanks for joining us as well. And last but not least, Jon, please.
And I thought I was just going to get ready to tell my story, and I thought my story was going to be interesting. I think Igor has already beat me to it. But my name is Jon Rivers. I'm the Chief Operating Officer at a marketing agency called Marketeri. We're actually a niche marketing agency. We're a full stack agency that actually only focuses on helping ERP and CRM partners that actually sell ERP and CRM, basically only Microsoft solutions. We do help others in the NetSuite, in the SAP and all that as well, but most of it's Microsoft. That's where we focus on. My background is I actually trained as a developer. So now it's like, how the hell does he get to marketing? But I went through a lot of different things. In my early stages of getting in ERP, I used to actually be even able to implement ERP which actually got me a little along. And that's one of the areas that we really focus on when we talk about our agency, is that we understand what our customers are selling because we've been in the trenches, right? Which makes us a little different. But like a lot of others here, we do everything from baseline messaging to websites to SEO, sorry, I get the words now, AEO, GEO. It's getting complicated with all these acronyms these days. And a lot of content development, everything from writing to videos to you name it, basically.
So I'm grateful to have you here as well, and I think that the unique perspectives of this recording session are going to be fascinating, as some of the stuff we talk about is, I mean, it's going to be very different depending on the industry you're in. So I appreciate the variety here. Thanks for joining us, Jon. I'm gonna jump into the first question, and I'm gonna keep it pretty vague, as we'll probably dive a little deeper into it. But we are seeing, I think more than ever, there's a lot of agencies across all of North America. A lot of people have started their own agencies. But we also see a lot of churn in the industry, where a lot of agencies lose customers very quickly within the first year. Why do you think so many companies churn through the number of agencies they work with today? Tell me a little bit about what you're seeing in your industries and why that's happening, and we'll probably evolve this to try to understand how AI is being associated with some of that churn today. So tell me again, just why do you think so many companies are churning through agencies?
In my opinion, I think a lot of it is misalignment of the processes. You know, a lot of agencies are selling metrics that they can't control, right? When it comes to SEO directly, it's not lead generation as quickly as ads are, right? So it's a miscalculation. The expectation, customers' expectations aren't there. They're not understanding how long it takes for the process to work, or they're going with the old school only backlinks. There's a bigger idea here about building authority now when you're talking about the AEO and the answer engines and all of that kind of stuff. And I think if you don't have the right expectations, then you're not a growth partner. You're a doer. So that would be what I would think.
Yeah. I agree with you, Marilyn. And, I think it was right after COVID, or like 2020, 2021, there was a boom in agencies, right? We suddenly got so many competitors, but, then the question that arises is the quality factor, right? Do these people actually know what they're doing? Because let's be honest, there isn't that big of a barrier to entry in our industry. Well, it's so broad too, right? I see the cycle all the time. Companies aren't churning because the agency didn't do enough. They're churning because they got hit with what I call the complexity tax. And agencies try to justify their retainers by adding bloated service menus and strategies that try to say everything but end up saying nothing, right? So that reminds me of what you're saying also, Marilyn, right? And the reality is most established businesses don't have a lead gen problem. They have a clarity problem. And over 15 years of running agencies, I found that retention happens when you treat the client budget with an owner's mindset, and you focus on actual profitability, lowering their acquisition costs, instead of just building a massive engine that's too heavy to actually accelerate.
Yeah, I totally agree with the two of you, but I think that from my sort of side of it, and maybe the overlap it as well, like I said, we're in a very niche space and we only focus in a niche space. One of the areas that we see the churn that comes from outside is that a lot of the folks who end up maybe coming to talk to us have gone to other agencies who just don't understand the ecosystem. I always joke is that they just don't know how to spell CRM, or they don't know how to spell ERP, right? So it's not just using the products, but it's understanding there is a nuance in it. An ERP is just, for anyone who doesn't know, but an ERP sale doesn't just happen in 5 minutes. It could take 6 months. It could take 9 months. It could actually take a couple of years to sell. So sometimes those things could be a long sell. And if you don't understand that and the nurturing of that, that makes it very hard. I've seen, talking to the companies we work with, they've even taken agencies to specialized conferences, and they've not still picked up and understood the community and how it works. I think that's where we see a lot of, and I've talked to other agencies in our niche space, they see that a lot happening as well. We're not trying to say that we don't lose clients as well, but I think that's where a lot of what we see is outside agencies, they can be amazing marketing, and I'm not trying to knock any of that, but there is a nuance in the space. I mean, I sit on, just to add it as well, I sit on SEMrush's ambassador program, and it's interesting to listen to some of the things that come through that. Is there is a struggle sometimes with some of the folks out there who may be doing SEO of trying to understand every single line of business. And I don't think you can. And I think that's where agencies get themselves stuck. But I totally agree with both Igor and Marilyn. At the end of the day, is trying to keep a customer is sometimes tough, but you've got to set those rules at the beginning. But even that can be challenging as well on setting those expectations, right? How much do they want to spend sometimes, because their expectations are maybe they say one thing at the beginning, but maybe they're not later down the road, right?
I want to jump in here. I have a thought on this. I was privileged to talk to an agency that talked about custom packages versus providing like a set package. And I think I had an opinion on this that was maybe wrong after talking to him, because we talked to a lot of agencies that have worked for bigger agencies, or a lot of smaller agencies that they founded it because they had worked for a bigger agency, and they had provided a set package, and they felt like this set package never did justice to what the customer needed. And they left so that they could create something that was better. They wanted to create a more custom package, a more custom setup. And after talking to this agency, he told me the exact opposite of what I expected, which was custom is garbage. And I was like, all right, you're going to have to explain this to me, because I'm disagreeing right off the bat. And then he expanded it to say, I offered custom packages for like 15 years. And that what really happened was we niched down into a very specific marketing branch where we understood the customer so well that it was now wrong for us to offer custom packages, because we were customizing it according to what the customer wanted, and they no longer understood what they needed. And now they've created 3 packages that are aligned with what the customer needs, when it doesn't necessarily make sense to the customer, that they understand the industry far better than their customer does at that level. So knowing that Marilyn and Jon are niched down, Igor, I got to be eager to understand how you've approached that as well. But I want to open up the debate here. Custom packages versus very niche down created packages. Where do you guys position yourselves?
I would say, I mean, for us, I mean, we always enter in with packages that are already there. I would use the word not necessarily customized. I would say that maybe we're taking things out or adding out of like the package. So maybe it's more of, let's say for our argument's sake, we've got a $5,000 package, a $10,000 package. Maybe there's a $7,500. Maybe you can only budget $6,000, right? We're going to look at that. We know that the $7,500 would be a better one, but we'll look at it and explain to them. Maybe there's going to be a longer on-ramp, but what can we adjust on it? So it's still following the same rules as a package, a pre-packaged, but it's not a custom package, even that it technically is, I suppose you could use, still is a custom one, because it was, that's why you use the word tailored, because it was tailored to their budget. But we're following a set rules of what we do. I think that's, in my mind, is the difference between a custom package.
Yeah, we operate in a similar way too. You know, and by the way, to answer your question too, we used to be a generalist marketing agency, and a while back we sort of became more niched out in terms of, you know, we switched more to e-commerce, SaaS, and sort of home improvement. That's sort of like our wheelhouse. We do take other type of clients and accounts, but that's really where we've been sort of creating those packages for. I do like to stick more to, you know, the framework that we have in terms of an existing package. I don't like customization because things tend to go off the rails. there's leeway, there's flexibility, right? Like what Jon was just talking about inside of your, inside of your prepackaged service, where, you move things around in terms of like budget. Okay, do you get, maybe do you maybe get more, give them more backlinks if they're spending more, on the basic level, maybe something more complex of like, okay, how intense is the strategy going to be? How robust is it going to be, right? But I am not a fan of customization because it kind of reminds me of like Steve Jobs, where I think I heard this in a podcast where Kevin O'Leary was saying he worked with him briefly, and they were talking about what the customer wants, and Steve, being the rude guy that he was, he said, shut up. They don't know what they want. They need to shut up. I will tell them what they want, and that's kind of the thing too, where what we do in marketing, it has so many different components to it, and it's an ocean of knowledge and implementation and execution that's required of us. We're talking about this concept of expectations, right? That's a big, huge one in our industry. And quite frankly, after 16 years of doing this, I've come to the conclusion that, like what Steve Jobs was saying about their customers at Apple, I have to sort of tell them what they want. Now that sounds sort of like harsh, like a little arrogant. I'm just sort of like being sarcastic here, right? But the reality is, it's always up to us, I think, to pull them back, pull them back to sort of how you operate, and learning sometimes to say no. Not putting yourself in a position where you're compromising yourself and your values.
I agree with that. We have packages as well, but I think the big thing is when an SEO client comes to you, they have an idea of what SEO is. And so I think by being that growth partner, not just a task doer of a lot of these SEO firms that kind of came out of the woodwork, we can explain and help build a strategy and explain it's going to take an amount of time, right? This is not a 5-minute deal. This is not, 2 months you're going to be top of Google. So I think it's also explaining to them, like you said, they don't understand completely what it takes to do what they want. And so if you're that person that does that.
You took this to a way that I think is perfect for our next question, both of you, all three of you. So we're talking about fulfillment, and Marilyn, I appreciate what you're saying about we're not just task doers. We are the strategy creators. If clients have access to all these AI tools now, and these AI tools are guiding them towards strategies that they're wanting to implement, what is the role of the agency today as even the agencies are using AI tools? How are you utilizing these tools? How do you navigate a customer's strategy that they've developed with the tool and guide them along the way towards your agency's perspective? How are you guys approaching this complicated, I guess, new aspect of marketing today?
Well, the first thing I look at is when I needed an attorney, when I needed a divorce, I didn't do it myself, right? This is what we do all day, every day as a marketing agency, where our clients are running their businesses to make a profit, to do whatever they need to do to make their business grow, right? Or whatever their why is. So yes, AI is helping with content, but do they have the knowledge to run their business and create SEO strategy that long-term works? So I think you still have the point about bringing in a professional to do, what we know we've got the plan to make it happen. So AI can certainly help with content, but is AI can't, it can write a blog post, but is it going to build an authority strategy? Is it going to actually grow your Google business profile and get you in the map pack? Not in and of itself, or at least not at this point. So I think there's a lot more to it than just content, and that's what we bring to the table.
Yeah, I would echo that as well. But I think also on top of that, there is also that human element that AI cannot put on top of it as well. I think when you're definitely writing, and just going back to the writing as well, and I always say this is definitely in our space, and I'm sure it's in everyone else's space, because the technology is moving so fast in what we do. If someone hasn't already written about it, how is AI going to talk about it? How can AI write something if no one else has written about it? But on the flip side, people want to listen to thought leaders who are talking about their thoughts and their experiences. AI doesn't have that capability to do that, right? It doesn't want to people don't want to necessarily regurgitate or listen to a regurgitated piece of content that someone else has already written, which is what AI is basically doing, right? And that's, I think, the difference of what's out there that everyone does. You need to put someone else's thoughts on top of that piece. So, if at the end of the day, if there's a new, for in our world, if there's a new release of a product, right, there's 500 new features, right? At the end of the day, is go in there and drum and put my view of why I'm picking out these 5 different new features and why I see the benefit of that. How can AI do that? AI cannot put that out there. That's the big difference. I mean, there's many other things I could probably talk about where AI can help, but I don't think we're fully there yet. And I don't think even the customers we service are there yet, or even know how to use the tools successfully either.
I agree with both your points. AI is such an extraordinary, cool tool. It's like nothing we've ever seen before, right? It's just the sci-fi movies we've seen. They're finally starting to become real, right? AI is amazing for democratizing production, but it doesn't democratize strategy. If a business just uses AI to churn out content, they're just adding to the noise that drowns out their actual authority. The role of the agency is shifting from just doing the tasks to high-level strategy oversight. And at our agency, at Core Media, I operate more as an external CMO now. We use AI for workflow scaling, but the real value we bring is being that strategic bridge, right? So making sure the execution actually aligns with the revenue goals. The beautiful thing here is that AI handles the heavy lifting. Okay, it frees us up to focus on deep strategy and high fidelity, like storytelling. All of us here are seasoned enough to know that there's always been some kind of like threat in marketing. Like the sky is falling. Oh, SEO's dead, or this technology or this. And every single time it comes around, people lose their minds, and then we're like, oh, okay. For example, SEO, right, is just. You have now people are trying to, everybody's optimizing for more places, right? GEO, LLMs, and all this stuff, and Gemini and ChatGPT. And really what we've learned, right, is that SEO is still, if you're still doing incredibly good and you have been doing good technical SEO, AI is just like frosting on top of the cake, right? On top of the SEO cake that you just need to add. Just the flavor has changed a bit. But again, if you've been doing good SEO, you're 90% or 85% of the way there already.
There's like a language to technical SEO, right? There's like everyone's tried to define what technical SEO is. There's schema, there's header tags, there's rules for how many pieces of text should be inside each of those places. And it feels like that language is getting more understood by the AI tools, where people are kind of like bridging that gap between that knowledge and the execution. And now more people are able to produce technically sound websites than ever before, utilizing a lot of these tools. And I think that's great, except for the fact that we've made it possible for everyone to mass produce content and be seen by these AI tools. And now we have this really complicated aspect of everyone's doing more. There's more content, there's more blog posts, there's more everything. And it seems like we're at a balance now of less is more if you've done really good quality. How are you guys defining that quality today? And I'll change this even a little bit more. With AI creating content for so many, and knowing that most marketing agencies are going to utilize these tools because of the scalability of it, how are you utilizing these tools but still producing content that passes that human test and that you feel like is valuable beyond the point of just AI generated content? How are you bridging that gap in content creation?
First off, we never publish anything straight from AI. Everything has to go through human review because it's still, hallucinating when you come to, examples and that sort of thing. Putting together multiple pieces of content. So if you're creating we like to call it a cornerstone content. So like a full guide that would give you the authoritative stance in a particular subject, and making sure that there's FAQs that the LLMs can read, and then adding to it a video of the client actually speaking, talking about this particular thing. So instead of a blog post, it is a very interesting piece of content, but it didn't straight come from the AI. And that has more of it's longer, so it's indexed better, it's indexed more thoroughly. And of course, the LLM is pulling the FAQs and that sort of thing out of it.
Yeah, we're probably, it sounds like we've got a little bit of a similar. I'd normally, so ours is probably more of the multi pieces of content. I know there's different words of like people use as like the hub and spoke, the clustering concepts, right? Where you've got multiple pieces of content that are interweaved to each other, right? You've got the pillar page, right? And then everything is maybe going back, but they're all going back and forth with each other. We're finding that's very key on a topic. But again, going back to what are we doing? Yes, we're using AI maybe for the research, but it's never going to be the final piece. It's always got to be that humanized. But a lot of our content is written from a thought leadership standpoint. So again, it's not trying to write technical pieces. It's trying to be having someone's thoughts about how a certain topic or how certain products should work, or maybe it's talking about AI, right? About it's not there yet, right? That's the type of thing that people want to understand. So we're writing it from their point of view. And I think that again, it goes back to what I said earlier on. AI can't write that. So that's where we humanize it on the other side. What we may do is then put it back through AI and like do a review of it again to check and make sure you're maybe making sure everything's what you want it to. For example, did I add in the right amount of internal links, external links? Am I connecting to where I need to? Did I bring in all the keywords I wanted to? So still using AI to maybe speed up that process that maybe I would have spent hours doing as a manual process. We're using it to speed up that.
Yeah, in terms of how are we defining quality for this topic, for this question, in terms of using tools and adding tools, this is exactly what I've been talking about recently on LinkedIn, like a couple of weeks ago. I put a post, and essentially it talked about how in the early years of a business, growth is all about adding, right? Adding clients, services, adding tools. But for an established business, that exact more is what keeps you from the next level. And I think true scaling isn't an exercise in addition, it's an exercise in subtraction. So we have to be willing to subtract low margin distractions that we've always done it this way thinking, right? Sometimes saying no to a new channel protects your team from burning out and is the most profitable decision you can make. Like I tell my clients, the next breakthrough doesn't require a bigger engine, it requires a lighter car.
Yeah, and I think that I would also go back to all this as well. We've still got, even with all this content, we've still got, Marilyn, you brought it up, which is the whole branding piece, right? It's not just one piece. There's lots of moving pieces now we've got to think about, right? So we could write 20 pieces, hypothetically, or 100 pieces of great content. But if you've got bad reviews on Google and G2 and other platforms, you're still going to get pulled down. As well, and that content may rank okay with SEO, but it may not rank very well or get cited in the LLMs because of all the other criteria it's bringing in there. So you've got to look at it from a bigger picture, and I think that's the key as well. So it's not just quantity of content, sometimes it's less content, but looking at the bigger picture.
Yeah, true. I like the cornerstone content we were talking about is their guides, and it's not just one. It's like you said, the pillar and the wheel and spoke thing, right? And but also making all of that work with the Google Business Profile, because that is a huge piece of it now with your Google Business Profile for a local company. And if you don't have the reviews or the number of stars or whatever, if you don't have those types of things and that much of weighted points, if you will, on Google, then all your content is not going to have the same effect.
Yeah, and I think I would also add to that is, again, depending on the niche you're in, you need to also be looking outside of maybe Google is what other trusted authorities that are also beneficial to giving you credibility for reviews, right? I brought up G2. That's not necessarily beneficial for everyone. That's probably a little bit more software focused. But there are other places that you may need to make sure you're on to give you credibility.
So that's a perfect transition into the next question. And Jon, referring to the way you talked about websites and like the personal opinions being shared on those websites, I thought a little bit about how each website has essentially a personality. And these AIs are trying to match up the personality of a website with the personality of a searcher, right? So if you're in an AI tool, you've navigated 30 questions deep into your research, and now it's trying to pair you up with the company it thinks fits best. It's picked up a lot of puzzle pieces along the way to try to determine who's the right fit. So now there's still a question of, if there's a bunch of companies that have represented themselves well, who do we think is the right fit for them? And I bring this back to the website perspective of, for a long time, like for those that are using AI tools to create like a dental website, they're probably pretty good websites to tell you everything about the dental industry, but there may be aspects of it that maybe don't align with you. Either way, Google and these AI tools have to determine that which of them is the right fit for the customer. And this question stems back to aspects of authority that might be valuable today to show that one brand or one website is better or the right fit for a customer over the others. For a long time, it was solely, I think, link building. And link building was like the aspect of all authority for you to build your brand up online. I think there's still a huge play of that today, but what else are you guys seeing? Link building, and what else is an authority aspect today to help companies appear in those results?
I actually think what we're doing right here, right now, too, is putting yourself out there and having podcasts, having interviews. That's one of the most powerful things that people can do to differentiate themselves from other businesses that are not doing things like this. But technical SEO and on-page optimization are still the bedrock. In building 15 years of my career on those quality control systems, right? As search expands into LLMs and AI platforms, basic citations are getting watered down, I think. What cuts through the noise today is unfakeable human experience. So that's why I've been pivoting so heavily myself into studio-grade video production and podcasting recently. I started a podcast named Point of Departure. And when you have broadcast quality storytelling and real face-to-face conversation, it establishes a level of trust and authority that AI simply cannot hallucinate. In terms of authority, I think that there's been an added layer of complexity when it comes to authority, because now we're not only having to do everything that's everything that we had to do with traditional SEO with Google and the other search engines, but mainly Google. But now we have to also understand how the AI, LLMs, and GEO all works, and it's changing search. In some ways, I wouldn't say it's changing it fundamentally. It's just that like we talked about before, you have to be in more places. Like Jon said, G2, if you're a SaaS company, make sure that you're make sure you're hanging out where your customers are hanging out.
Yeah, and in the law field, there's, the backlinks or the citations listing in the directories that are industry specific is so much more important than being in every business directory online, right? There's like 84 main ones, and the top 5 you should be in, and that's a no-brainer. But start building on that, making sure that you're there. But I think it is multiple locations that you need to be there. Video is huge, and it makes such a difference to have video on your website. Like I said, on these cornerstone content bit, the pillar and spoke, the wheel and spoke thing, have a video talking about it. Those videos are transcribed by AI, where, so it's really interesting that you need to build authority, and that's something that that AI is not going to do for you. But if you're doing all of that, then AI is going to find you.
Yeah. Again, I'll use the word, I'm going to echo everything, but I think one area, one platform we haven't talked about is LinkedIn. And LinkedIn at the moment is at the top when it comes to driving for citations. It's a big place for people. I think at the end of the day, it goes back to, as a reminder, people don't buy from companies most times. Again, it depends on the size of the organization, but most people buy from people. And I sort of I take my mind back to the days when I know a lot of people play golf today, but it goes back to a long time back where golf was really a key element to business. Then it's sort of drifted off and it's come back again. Really, that's what you have to think about is people buy from people. People need to talk about, but they don't just talk about it. They need to show their expertise about it. And that goes for yours, Igor, about podcasts. Marilyn, videos, right? They need to be out there, going to conferences, talking, being on the docket as being a speaker. All of those things bring that credibility of who you are, right? And also, we do a lot of thought leadership, as I said, but we use the LinkedIn platform a lot to drive that. And that drives a lot of traffic. That's where the audience is. Now, if your audience is not there, then I probably wouldn't put it there. But again, it's like at the same time, if your audience is not in one of those trusted websites, don't bother about it. Focus where they are. That's all you need to worry about because that's what the LLMs and everyone else is looking. And sometimes let's just take away that hat. Forget about that, right? Because if we're popping up on the trusted places and they see us there, that's what's going to bring their attention as well. So forget about SEO, forget about AI, forget about everything else. We've got to show up in the right places as well. So, I mean, I actually look at it at the moment. For me, I'm loving where we are at the moment because things have moved so fast. Things are changing quickly. AI has brought a lot of pros and cons at the moment, but it's also opened the door for a lot of opportunity for companies who never, maybe 2 years ago, didn't have the opportunity from an SEO standpoint.
There's a term I heard recently that I hadn't heard before, and it's pretty basic. Authority builds authority. And when I think about like the video content that you guys are talking about, it's if you're not an authority, you probably don't make it on every podcast repeatedly. You have limited opportunities to discuss things because your insights weren't as valuable as someone else's insights might have been. I think of how valuable that is in the authenticity of someone today online and their view online. And John, to your point, it probably levels the playing field now where it's not necessarily those who can spend the most to get the most content produced. It has to do with the actual authority and the expertise of that individual and the brand that they start building online for themselves. And it does level the playing field for those that are not necessarily leading with dollars.
Yeah. I mean, I know that we've got a client that literally started their ERP practice they celebrated a year. They really started kicking off their website about 9 months ago. So content's really only started coming around 9 months ago. They're already appearing in AI overviews. They're already beating people out there that have been around there for years that are stuffing a ton of content out there.
Which Igor's eager to mention, like, hey, maybe less is more, guys.
Exactly. That's the point, right? At the end of the day, that we're doing, at the end of the day, they don't have a big budget. At the end of the day, but it's set and done correctly. And I think that's the key. It is not always about lots of money, but it's doing the right things. It goes back also to your question earlier on about do we have custom packages or not as well, right? If you follow a set rules every time, you have a better chance of being successful as well. I think custom could take you all off on so many different tangents, right?
Or no one knows what you do because it's all over the place.
Yeah.
Just to appease the customer.
I want to take this into my final question for the three of you, which is a tough one because I'm asking you to predict the future. But with so much AI changing today, what do you see how do you see agencies existing in 2 years? What do you see the biggest changes? Where do they exist the strongest in the next couple of years? And Igor, I'll give you a little bit of a lead on this because I think you've already addressed it with some of your answers earlier in the podcast, but I want to hear from everyone. Where do you think agencies evolve to be?
Yeah, I think it's going to also steamroll over some agencies. It's already doing it. I think with some agencies, it's making some of them close their doors. I think we're going to be seeing more of that, not because the sky is falling, but because perhaps it's a layer of complexity they're just not ready to play in.
I think you raised the barrier to entry a bit as it gets so complicated. Yeah.
Correct. I mean, there's going to be, there's already all these like courses coming out and everything, and people will learn how to do things. Where do I see agencies in the next couple of years? First of all, what I love about AI in my business and in my podcast, in just my personal life, it kind of feels like in a way it's technically expanding our life, not just our personal life in a sense, but and stay with me on this, but also our work lives too, because it's this compression that we're dealing with, right, of time. You're able to do tasks that normally take you much, much longer in a very, very short amount of time. You're able to learn and you're able to digest things. It distills information that usually would take you a long time to learn. It distills it into its simpler components. And the amazing thing about it, of course, is it's dynamic, right? You can interact with the AI. It's not just like with Google. You put in a query and, whatever us SEOs did to put up the highest ranking site, and that was your one-off answer and that's it. And you had to read and then connect all the dots together from all these other different blue links or other websites. I foresee agencies adjusting and adapting. They're already doing it. I think that like Jon said earlier, it creates so much additional opportunity, right? You have all these additional services all of a sudden, right? There are agencies who they package their SEO into their AIO, all in one package. There are some that do it separately. I personally believe you should make it in one package and just say, okay, like we're going to do it all for you because of what I said earlier, where now it's like, okay, the fundamentals of SEO are still there. Now we have an additional layer on top, with the icing on it. I think that agencies are going to still, there's going to be tons of agencies. There's going to be new agencies opening all the time. And it's just, they're not going to be treating it, they're not going to be treating AI as a, when SEOs get scared with Google updates sometimes, this is totally different. But I really think that agencies are going to stick AI into everything they do. It's going to be sort of like linear, right? I think I heard Jeff Bezos say this earlier. It's going to be like electricity, right? It's going to be in everything in a sense, right? So, I'm really looking forward to that future. I don't see it as like a gloom and doom future like some of our colleagues might.
I'll jump in and share a quick thought on that. The view that I've heard from other agencies is that the marketing agencies will evolve to manage all the AI tools for customers and be like a complete package of integration instead of just fulfillment. I think that summarizes a bit of what you were saying. Marilyn and Jon, I want to hear if you have contrasting thoughts or what your perspective is on the agency evolution.
I find it interesting thinking about being the AI management integration, but I think it's going to come down to the growth strategy and building authority. That's what we're going to be focused on instead of just the generic blog posts, social media posts, that sort of thing. I think it's going to be more of helping clients build that authority, whether it's writing a book, podcasts, videos, the content on your website. I think it's going to be a bigger strategy is what we're going to have to move into instead of the really quick shot of things that people try to do just to get traffic to your website. That's just generic traffic.
Yeah, I think I mean, I agree with all that. And I think the other piece is at the end of the day for agencies, just got to, at the end of the day, things are going to keep, as we're seeing at the moment, things are moving so fast. The agencies who are going to survive are ones that still know the core things, but also can adapt and evolve rapidly. I think that's a key thing as well. I honestly do think niche is still going to be key. I think that's going to become more and more. And the reason I keep going that is because we see a lot of that in our ecosystem. It's like if someone's selling ERP, they're more better when they sell it just to a certain type of manufacturer, or they go and say, okay, we're going to focus all dentistries. At the end of the day, when they do that, they sell more. They're more successful because it's a repeatable business, right? It's less cost to them. I think that's really where it becomes more key. You're not trying to learn everything every time. I do like your idea of the fact of trying to manage all the tools. I mean, at the end of the day, that is a night. I can tell you. I mean, we could probably have another podcast about the nightmare of trying to manage all the tools, right? I mean, that alone is a nightmare, trying to manage the 3 million tools that we have to manage internally to manage everything, to understand what's working and what's not working. And that's not getting easier. It's actually, I think it's getting more complex.
I think the number one question I have from agencies that they want to hear from other agencies is, what tools are you using today that are actually working? Because there's so much available to them. They need to figure out how to filter through the mess and find what actually works.
Well, I think it's also, I mean, I know we're getting close to the top of the time here, but I think it's also the cost, right? Because if you want to start tracking the question-based stuff, I know with a lot of tools I'm looking at, it's not the same cost as what it was to go and track one keyword, right? Tracking keywords was very easy. It was cheap. You get into tracking AI questions, it's very costly.
Even just the consumption of trying to figure out the ICP and like really personify your customer within these tools and then find out their questions has been a really nuanced part of it.
Right. Exactly. And if you're trying to track it across, say, 5 LLMs, right, you got to basically track it all 5 LLMs, right? So that means if you're tracking 3 words, now you're actually 3 questions, it's actually 15 times. So that's the big difference. I mean, yeah. I mean, I could go off, like I said, I could go off.
No, I think that is the great question for the other podcast. We'll try to collect more of that information from agencies maybe and release favorite tools, as we have so many agencies that come through the podcast for guests. We are out of time. I want to thank the 3 of you for joining us on SEO On Air. This has been a great episode. We'll see you next time. Thank you, guys.